So nutrition is a pretty big topic, so I'm going to break it up into a series of videos. The first one is going to talk about the food groups, the macronutrients, what the body is kind of composed of in general, calories, how you calculate your daily requirements, and then we look at some nutrition labels of different foods and also a few diseases that can be caused by lack of certain nutrients. And that's just kind of an introduction before we go into more detail, like in a future video. So why do we need to eat? Well, for a couple of reasons. One is this is how we obtain energy for our body. And second, it provides the building blocks of life. And this can be divided into carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, which we'll go into more detail in the next slide. Second, just wanted to mention that we can live for 2 to 3 weeks without food. And again, this depends on your health status to begin with, if you're going into a starvation mode, and how much fat your body has. But we can only live for about 3 days without water. Now, the water composition of the body is actually 60%. Some of it is intracellular, or actually the majority is intracellular. And the rest is what's called interstitial, which is between the cells, and then in our vasculature. So here's the breakdown of the body for adult males and females, and you'll notice some differences. One is, and we know this by observation, that typically most men tend to have more muscle. Women actually have more fat, and part of that is all of the breast tissue is actually fat, so that itself adds on to the fat. And then just because of hormonal differences, we carry a little more fat probably in the thighs than in the abdomen. The bone weight, by weight, of course, males are, just because if they're larger, they're going to have a little more mass, and then the organs are about the same. So if you think about a baby, all the nutrition the fetus receives from the mother and grows into a baby. And once we're born, the amount we grow to become an adult is all because of the nutrition we're taking in. So really your mass increases based on the food you eat, and you're adding on to that mass. So, you know, the cells continue to divide, so you have more and more cells in the body until you get to your full adult size. And what we don't use, we eliminate as waste in the urine and the stool. Now, if you overeat, that can lead to obesity. If someone doesn't get enough food, they can be malnourished and can be underweight. And if that happens with poor nutrition, they may not reach the height they were meant to be based on their DNA. And they may be thinner, they may have, will most likely have less musculature, they'll have less fat. So overall, they'll weigh less and be smaller. And probably at the end of this, we'll talk a little bit more about some diseases related to lack of certain nutrients in the diet. I just happened to come across this diagram, and I just thought it was interesting. Again, that points out that water is about 60% of the body by composition. And then you've got 16% protein, 16% fat, and then 6% in minerals. And just wanted to point out again that the human body, as well as all living things, are predominantly composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And then in smaller quantities, these other elements listed here. Okay, well, here's the classic food pyramid that is taught in school and certainly is everywhere in the public. However, in more recent times, they've actually come up with a plate which has a different amount of these different food groups. So it's been a debate what percent of each food group you should have in your diet. Some people are vegetarian and they're not going to be eating meat, and they may not eat dairy. So, based on your own goals, you may eat more of one food group than another. So what are the food groups? Well, at the base of the pyramid, you have a lot of these carbohydrates, which are composed of bread, cereals, rices, and pasta. And then you've got fruits and vegetables, dairy, protein, and then fats. And so let's start with the base of the pyramid. I mean, according to this, it says 6 to 11 servings. I mean, honestly, most people are going to probably be eating less than that if you don't want to gain weight. But in general, once you eat any of these bread, cereals, rices, or pasta, those are broken down into simple sugars, and you absorb these as sugars in the body. And there may be some fiber composition in this if you eat whole wheat. And that's basically what you're getting from the base of the pyramid. And things like cereals and even breads, they actually have some added vitamins and minerals, but they're not naturally occurring. They're added in the food preparation process. So then the next level, the fruits and vegetables, are really the best for you. One, they have pretty good amount of water. They have a pretty good amount of fiber, which is also good for digestion. And then they have the sweeter fruits and vegetables have more simple sugars, so they don't require much breakdown. But then some things like potatoes have a lot of starch, which does not taste sweet until it's broken down into its simple sugars. So you can't always tell by the taste of a food how many calories or how much sugar is in them. And then the other thing is you get a lot of vitamins. All of your vitamins and minerals can be found in fruits and vegetables. And depending on the color of the fruit, it may have a predominant vitamin. For example, anything that's yellow or orange, such as or rather orange, like carrots and sweet potatoes, have a lot of vitamin A, as does tomatoes. And then something that's green, like broccoli, spinach, they have vitamin K. And bananas have potassium. And I'll go over all the vitamins and minerals in a different video. And then you have the dairy products, which are milk, yogurt, and cheeses. And these have sugars, proteins, and fats. And then you have the meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and nuts. They all have a lot of protein. And some meats can be more fatty than others, and especially if you leave the skin on chicken, for example. That contains a lot more fat than if you were to remove the skin and eat the meat. And then at the top of the pyramid, you have all the fats and oils. And you can have either, most of these are going to be vegetable fats, like avocado and olives, and other vegetables can be made into oils. And then something like butter, in the past, that used to be an animal fat, but now it's actually made out of vegetable fats. And then they also mention sweets and kind of snacks at the top of the pyramid. So to limit those, because they tend to be higher in calorie and less nutrition, meaning that they don't have really the vitamins and minerals, they just have some of the carbohydrates and a lot of the refined sugars. So in the last slide, we saw the pyramid with the different food groups. Now we'll divide the food into macronutrients, and there are 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fats. So everything you eat that was on the pyramid can be divided into these 3 categories. So all of the rice, breads, pasta, potatoes, for example, are all examples of carbohydrate-rich foods. Now, some fruits and vegetables also have, or actually pretty much all fruits and vegetables will have some quantity of carbohydrates. And the sweeter something is, the more sugar it contains. But things like potatoes, they have a lot of starch. So even though they don't taste sweet, once the body starts breaking down the potato in digestion, it'll release this into simple sugars. So then you do end up with a pretty good carbohydrate load. The next is protein, which is found in meats, chicken, fish, eggs, beef, etc. And then some plants also have a pretty good amount of protein, such as legumes and beans. And then last you have fats. The unsaturated fats tend to be in vegetables, and a lot of the oils are made out of vegetables. So you have olive oil, avocado oil, and other vegetable oils. And then you have seeds and nuts, which also contain fat. And you've probably heard of sesame oil. So the sesame seeds can also be pressed, and an oil is created from that. And then the saturated fats tend to be in all the meats. And there is there was thought that unsaturated fats are healthier for you, meaning the vegetable fats, and that the saturated fats were more likely to lead to heart disease and other problems. But I'll talk about this in another video, that there are large studies that have been conducted, and it's controversial whether these are really worse for you or not based on some studies. Okay, so here we're going to talk about carbohydrates. So the first image is a monosaccharide, which means it's a single sugar, and it's the other name for sugar is in this is glucose, and this is what the body actually uses for energy. All of the complex carbohydrates that you see here, which is a long chain of these sugars, are broken down into individual glucose molecules, and this is what's absorbed into the bloodstream and then used by the cell to create energy. So that's what you need this for, is to go to so that it can get to the cell, and then the cell breaks it further down, and then it creates energy through ATP. What we eat as what you know as table sugar is a disaccharide, meaning it's two sugars joined together. And before the body can actually utilize it, this bond has to be broken so that it can be glucose. And then again, this complex carbohydrates, those are the starches that are found in pastas, breads, rice, cereals, and in starchy vegetables such as potatoes and sweet potatoes and yams. Okay, so proteins. Proteins have this basic structure where you have a central carbon that has a hydrogen, and then you have an amide group, which is the NH2, and then you have this carboxyl group, which is a COOH. So every amino acid has the amide and the carboxyl group. So what's different between amino acids is the R group. So there are 20 amino acids in nature, and 8 of them are essential, which means that the body cannot actually build this molecule. You have to eat this in the diet. So, and again, the only difference between the amino acids is this R group. So a protein is actually just a long chain of different amino acids. And so we end up eating proteins, and then we have to break them down into the individual amino acids to absorb them. And actually, sometimes it can be a dipeptide or a tripeptide, meaning that it's 2 or 3 amino acids that are linked together that can be absorbed into the bloodstream. And then those are then later processed by the body to make further proteins. So within our body, we actually build up and create proteins, but when we're eating protein, we actually are breaking down the protein. So here's the structure of fats. The top one is a saturated fat, and that just means that all the carbons have a single bond. So it's a long carbon chain with hydrogens and a COOH on one side, and all of these are single bonds. So then in the unsaturated fats, you'll see there's a double bond, and that double bond actually causes a kink. So it kind of causes it to bend. And this is what's unsaturated. In general, it's been taught that unsaturated fats in olives, avocados, other vegetables, nuts, and seeds are healthier than saturated fats. And saturated fats tend to be found in meats. Now, there are studies showing that this may or may not be the case, that saturated fats are also healthy. But again, that'll be for a different video. So calories, what is a calorie? It's actually a unit of energy when we break down the food. So when we're eating food, everything is broken down into its simple components to be absorbed, which is going to be the glucose from carbohydrates, amino acids from proteins, and the fats. And each has its own calorie value. So a glucose molecule, or a gram of glucose, has 4 calories. A gram of protein is also 4 calories, and a gram of fat is 9 calories. And I just included alcohol in here because we know what the value is, and that's something that adults commonly do drink, and that's 7 calories per gram. So if you eat something that's higher in fat per gram weight, you're actually getting more calories. So if you ate 30 grams of fat, you'd be getting a lot more. You'd be getting double the calories of, say, 30 grams of a carbohydrate or protein. So this slide just talks about what are your actual daily requirements in terms of calories. A teenage male to an adult male may require from 2,000 to 2,400 calories, and then a teenager to an adult female may require between 1,800 to 2,000 calories on average. Now, women will generally require less calories because they tend to be smaller. We may have smaller muscle mass. And if the person is very active, if they're an athlete or they exercise a lot, they may require an additional 200 to 600 calories. So what we need the calories for are, there's 2 components. One is the resting energy expenditure, which is what you need, what your body needs to maintain itself just when you're sitting and sleeping. Then it needs on top of that whatever else is needed when you're active. So the resting energy expenditure for a person may be around 1,200 to 1,400 calories, depending on how much muscle they have. And really it depends on the age, weight, height, and sex of the person. So then the rest of the calories beyond that are from activity. It may not have to be exercise. You may just be walking. You may be doing chores at home. You may have, you may be working, whatever it is. So it's the amount you require at rest plus whatever else you need when you're doing your activities throughout the day gives you your total daily calorie intake. So if you eat about what you need, and that's what the body does, it regulates itself. It'll tell you that you're hungry and you eat, or it'll tell you that you're thirsty and you drink. And if you eat a balanced meal, then you'll maintain kind of your optimal balance. But once you start eating more, that's when you start gaining weight. If you take in more calories than what you spend in a day, then those get stored as fat calories, and that's when you start gaining weight. That will be in the next video. But I just wanted to go through the basics of how many calories you need in a day, and kind of what determines what that is kind of your activity level and what you're doing throughout the day. And of course your age, your weight, your height, and your sex. So let's look at the nutrition label. I mean, this is generally taught in school, but many people don't really read labels, but let's go ahead and talk about what the components are. So this is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And at the top, they'll give you the serving size, so the amount. So in this, the first label is for white rice, and the second label is for sliced bread. And So you look at the serving size first. For the rice, it's a 1/4 cup dry, and it's 45 grams, and if it's cooked, it would come out to 3/4 of a cup. So then it gives you the total amount of calories. So with the rice, it's 160 calories for that 3/4 cup of cooked rice. And then it'll give you the amount of fat and cholesterol and sodium, which is 0 for the rice when you don't add anything to it. And then it has a little bit of natural potassium, 40 milligrams, a pretty small amount, 1% of your daily requirement. And then the important part here is where you're getting your calories from is the carbohydrates, which is 35 grams, and that's only 12% of your daily intake. And then it has a little bit of protein, 3 grams, and then it goes on to give you the vitamins and minerals that are in this product. So it has some thiamine, iron, and niacin and folate. So, you know, if you eat 1 serving, or you can even eat 2 servings, then that would be, if you ate 2 servings, that would be 24% of your daily intake of carbohydrates. So that's like 1/4 of your calories. So if you were to eat the rice with, say, some vegetables, vegetables also have carbohydrates, so that would add an additional number of calories and carbs to that meal. And then most of the time, of course, you'll be cooking with some kind of vegetable oil, so that'll also add a tablespoon or a teaspoon of oil, so that gives you some of the fat calories. So that's why this is useful if you are watching your diet or you're trying to lose weight. This will allow you to count kind of how much you're eating with each meal. So then let's look at the sliced bread. So 1 slice is 43 grams and it's 100 calories. So if you're going to eat a sandwich, really you'd be eating 2 slices of bread. And so that would be 200 calories. And then the main thing in bread, of course, is the carbohydrates. So if you come down to the total carbohydrates, it's 12 grams. And that's only 4% of your daily intake. And so 2 slices would be 24 grams for 8% of your daily intake. Now, the nice thing here is with this particular bread, you are getting some fiber, 6 grams, 21%. So this must be a whole wheat bread. And then other things you're getting are a little bit of fat, a little bit of sodium, and then protein, which is 4 grams, 8%. And if you ate 2 slices, you double that, and that'd be 8 grams or 16%. And then you also get very small amount of calcium, iron, and potassium. So I thought this was a really cute image. On the left you have a tomato, and then on the right you have a peach, and there's a nutrition label overlaying it. So the tomato has only 27 calories, and to figure out the carbs in that, it's just 27 divided by 4, and that would be like 6.5 grams of carbs. Now, you know, the tomatoes are pretty good size, so most of the actual weight and size is coming from water. There's 141 grams of water, and water doesn't have any calories. And then the other thing you get in the tomato is the vitamins. So you get vitamin A, C, and K, and it gives you the relative percent on the side here. And then if you look at the peach, it has more calories than the tomato because it's sweeter, so you know that it has more sugar, more simple sugars. And so if you divide 68 by 4, that would give you 17 grams. And so that's how many, it has 17 grams of carbs. And this doesn't give you your percent daily value. If you really wanted to know what percent of your daily value this is, you would simply say 68 calories divided by 2,000 times 100, and that would give you your percent. So then this also has a lot of water, and it's at 155 grams, and then it also has vitamins and minerals, so it has A, C, K, niacin, and potassium. And then you can see the relative percent of your daily intake that is. So as you can see, and there's no protein or fats in either of these, so this is, you know, healthy, low calorie, and you're getting vitamins and minerals. So let's contrast this candy bar to the previous fruits and vegetable that we saw. So this has a total of 190 calories, of which 80 are from fat. and it gives you the number of grams of fat, which is 9 grams, or 14% of your daily requirements. And then it even breaks it down into the saturated fat, the cholesterol. And the total carbs in this is 25 grams, which is quite a bit. Even the peach was only 17 grams. But this still only, adds up to 8% of your daily values, so it's not too high for one serving. And then you have protein of 3 grams. Now, you can see here the vitamins and minerals are pretty negligible. There's just a little bit of calcium at 2%. And so the protein is probably coming from the peanuts in here. And then the carbohydrates are, of course, going to be all the sugar. So this is all going to be simple sugar, not the complex starches like in, say, potatoes. So if you did eat this, it is going to give you calories. And I mean, 200 is not too bad. But this will give you a little bit of a higher sugar spike in your bloodstream. Because these are simple sugars, they're easy to break down and absorb. And so spiking sugars are not a good thing in the long run. If you frequently eat this type of processed food, potentially that could lead to diabetes later on. Not to say that I don't enjoy desserts or sweets, once in a while, but you just have to kind of watch how much of this you're going to be eating. And of course, you have to realize that you're talking about half a pack, which, they're bite-sized pieces. So if you don't want to eat the whole pack, or 2 or 3 packs, for example, because that would really add on the calories. So we went through how to read a food label and kind of the relative amounts of calories in different types of food. So now we also learned that a person needs anywhere from 1,800 to about 2,000 calories. So we'll kind of just use 2,000 calories daily requirement for this calculation. And depending on what your goals are, some people want to gain muscle mass, some people may want to lose weight, other people may have, say, heart disease, they want to cut out some fats in their diet, or they have high blood pressure, they may want to cut out some sodium. So, as you get older, you may have some requirements of what you need in your diet. So I'm just using a 2,000 calorie diet. I just wanted to go through a calculation of what you could do. So if you want 45 to 65% carbohydrates, and I just kind of took the average of that, which is, say, 50% of carbohydrates in the diet, then you just multiply 0.5 times 2,000, and that gives you 1,000. And so 1,000 calories are what you want to eat in carbohydrates. So then you divide that by 4 calories per gram, and that gives you 250 grams. So you saw on the nutrition label something might be 35 grams, which is, gives you, then you can kind of add up your carbohydrate grams throughout the day, and that'll give you an idea of what you're eating, or that'll guide you towards what you need to eat in order to get that 250 grams. And then in general for protein, it's recommended that a person needs about 0.8 grams to 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. And so that's, if we want 25% of our calories from protein, then you multiply 0.25 times 2,000, and that gives you 500. So then you divide 500 by 4, which is the 4 calories per gram for protein, which is the same as the carbs, and that gives you 125 grams. Now, if you eat a patty, such as a hamburger patty or a chicken patty, those are typically about 4 ounces in size. And an ounce is 30 grams, and 30 times 4 is 120. So if you ate a hamburger or a chicken sandwich, that would pretty much give you your 125 grams of protein for the day. And you wouldn't really require any other protein at dinner or breakfast, for example, if you ate this at lunch. And then next is fat, if you want 25% of your calories from fat, and it's the same as the protein, so you say 0.25 times 200 is 500 calories. But fat is 9 calories per gram, so you divide 500 by 9, and that gives you 55 grams. So that's just under 2 ounces that you need as fats. And that fat would be in the cooking oil, it can come from butter. If you are eating a snack or a baked good, there may be butter or oil that's in that food. If it's something that's fried, like a meat or even a vegetable or saute. So that's where you kind of get your fat calories. And again, based on what you require, you can change this to any percent. You can calculate what you need for if you wanted 60% of your diet to be carbs, and then 30% as protein and 10% as fat, and so on. Okay, so I have two different kind of meals here. Both of them are fast food meals, but of course you can easily make a sandwich at home. So if we look at the McDonald's, you have a Big Mac, French fries, and a soda. Now, this is a large French fry and a large Coke. And of course, a Big Mac has an extra patty in it. So you are eating, a larger portion than what people really require. And if you look at the total calories in this, it's 1,360 calories. So if you have a 2,000 calorie diet, you're already getting more than 50 or 60, you're already getting about 60% or more of your calories from this one meal. And in this meal, you already have 58 grams of fat. So if you look at the last example, that gives you your whole daily requirement of fat, like when we said we needed 55 grams of fat on the calculation. And then the other thing to watch for is sodium. So this is half your daily requirement of sodium. And then for your total carbs, you're at 63%. So 190 grams is 63%. So you've already gotten that much of your carbohydrates in. And then if you look at protein, you've gotten 32 grams. So even though you've got 2 meat patties, the actual amount of protein is only really 1 ounce. So you end up getting more calories from fat and carbohydrates in this meal. And some of the other carbohydrates are also the sugar that you have in the drink. So, and then look at the vitamins and minerals. You do get a pretty good amount of calcium in this, surprisingly. I guess part of it is from the cheese. And then you have, I'm assuming this number is correct. And then the amount of iron is 30%. But again, because the protein is only 32 grams, I kind of find that hard to believe that you're getting that much iron in that. And then you have a little vitamin A and a little vitamin C. And then if you look in contrast to the Subway 6-inch turkey sandwich, you're only getting 250 calories. Now, I know this is going to be without cheese and mayonnaise or any other kind of dressing on it. So usually if you add cheese and mayonnaise or anything else on it, it would easily be 350, about 350 calories. But if you compare the 350 calories, you eat this and you drink a glass of water, compared to this Big Mac meal, which is 1,300, you can easily see that the person that's eating the turkey sandwich is not going to be gaining weight, and if anything, they may be able to lose weight if that's their goal. So if you were to eat a meal like the Big Mac meal 2 or 3 times a day, that's already 2,600 to 3,600 calories a day. And if you're not an active person, you're going to, easily start putting on some weight because those are excess calories. So this is the importance of these nutrition labels, is that you get an idea of your calorie intake. If you eat homemade food, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, then you probably don't have to worry. And certainly you can, if you just go by when you're hungry and full, then you may not have to worry. So, in the last slide, we had an extreme example of a very high calorie meal versus a low calorie meal. But in general, what most people do actually eat, or what you can aim for, is 500 to 600 calories per meal, and that would give you around, plus a 200 calorie snack would give you your 1,800 calories for the day. If that's what you're eating, then you're unlikely to be gaining weight. Now, you can always eat a heavier meal or a lighter one, again, based on your activity level and what your goals are. And then remember that if you eat more calories than what you're using, then you're going to gain weight as fat. There are many diseases that can occur from lack of food and minerals and vitamins in the diet. In developed countries, we tend to have a pretty good food source, and so you rarely see a malnourished person unless they purposefully don't eat, and they can develop what's called anorexia. And instead, we have the opposite, which are obesity problems. Now, in some countries where food is lacking, two diseases in pediatrics are marasmus and kwashiorkor. In both, they're extremely thin, and in kwashiorkor, they have a lack of protein, which can lead to a large abdomen as the child gets older. And without proper nutrition, certainly they're going to be at risk of dying, or they'll be more prone to susceptible to any other diseases, especially infectious diseases. And then there are vitamin deficiencies such as scurvy and rickets. Scurvy, which was first discovered in sailors, and it was found out that they lacked vitamin C, and rickets, which is a lack of vitamin D, and the bones tend to be soft. And anemia, which is from lack of iron. And there are many causes of anemia, but this is one of them. And there's many more, so in the next video we'll probably talk about vitamins and minerals and what an absence of them, what diseases can occur from the absence of them, and what role they play in the body. Okay, well, that's the end of the video, and there's still a lot of things to talk about in terms of nutrition, the GI system, and then certain diseases like diabetes, and the role vitamins and minerals play in the body, as well as diseases due to lack of those. And then there's also all the diets that are out there. So those will be covered probably in the next 2 or 3 videos, in fact, just because it is a lot to talk about. And hopefully you liked it, so please like, subscribe, and share.